Hi everyone, it's Chris. Welcome back to my parlour and what books I read in November. I read quite a few in November because in November I just needed some distraction. It's my hump month every year, but I won't go into that. I've got my books here that I read. They're not in order at the moment, but I will show you them in order of reading and what I will keep and what I won't keep, what I enjoyed and what I didn't enjoy. And some of the books are not here in physical form. One I threw away, I'll explain later, and one I have on my Kindle. So let's have a look and see what I read and what I thought about each book. So the first book that I read is this one, and I may have shown you, or you may have seen it in my book haul. It's Stalking Jack the Ripper by Kerry Maniscalco. It's a young adult fantasy under the James Patterson Productions, under his publishing house. It was okay. I couldn't get into the character of Audrey Rose. It just wasn't. I just couldn't believe her character. I just couldn't relate to her character. I liked Thomas. He was quite fun, but Audrey Rose just wasn't hitting it for me. Set in Victorian England during the time of Jack the Ripper. I worked out who Jack the Ripper was, but I didn't know how or why or any other details until the end, which was sort of satisfying, but not enough for me to want to keep the book. I was interested in the developing relationship between Thomas and Audrey Rose, but I've been able to satisfy myself with that in another book that I've read, so I don't think I need to read any more in the series. There are 4 in the series. The next one I have borrowed from the library, but I don't know if I'll be reading it. Audrey Rose comes from a very noble family. She's presents herself in that respect, and she's very much interested in medicine and science, so she learns that through her uncle, who is a surgeon and a lecturer in modern, at that time, modern medicine, and about, dissecting and learning about human anatomy and things like that. But then she goes on to investigate the murderer Jack the Ripper. So, and the adventure that ensures from that. She solves the crime, and that's the beginning of the series of her crime solving, more of the monsters and things that go around in society during Victorian times. So overall it was an okay book. I did enjoy it. Wasn't too pleased or too keen to read the bits about dissection of the human body. That sort of didn't grip me very well, so it was a bit gory, but otherwise it was an okay book. The story itself was an okay story, so I read it, I sort of enjoyed it, but I won't be keeping it. The sequel to this one, the second in the series, I did borrow it from the library, and it's Hunting Prince Dracula. Set in Europe, of course, where Audrey Rose is given an opportunity to attend medical school to further her studies. So off she goes with Thomas. Of course, there's murder and mayhem that account for her actions, and she goes off. She and Thomas go off solving the crimes of Prince Dracula. I don't know if I'm going to be reading it. It's more of the same dissections and stuff, which I'm not really interested in pursuing anymore. I think once is enough. But of course it's the basis of the story, except for the hunting of Prince Dracula, of course. So I don't know if I'll be reading that. I love the cover of the book, especially here at the back. It looks really, really cool. But not enough for me to delve into the book. So that will be going back to the library. And I have found out a little bit of information about the relationship between Thomas and Audrey Rose in an ebook that I purchased from Amazon, put on my Kindle, and it's called Becoming the Prince of Darkness, because we find out that Thomas is actually the last in line of the Dracula legacy. So he's part of that, the legacy of Dracula, and his father always told him that he would become a monster. So in Becoming the Prince of Darkness, he talks about his feelings and what he's thinking and how relevant that would be to becoming the Prince of Darkness, how bad they are, and his feelings and what have you for Audrey Rose. And so I found out about that. But his feelings that he expresses in the book, Kerry Maniscalco expresses in her book, in Victorian times, of course, it would have been shocking. It would have been, wow, this is really dark stuff. But in today's standards, of course, it would be quite normal. So I don't think he was in any danger of becoming the Prince of Darkness. But it was an interesting read, and I found out about the relationship, so I'm quite happy with that. So I don't think I need to finish the series. There are 2 more books after this one, and the Becoming the Prince of Darkness was set in the book after this one, and that was Escaping from Houdini. That's the next book, the 3rd book, and I think that Becoming the Prince of Darkness is set after that one. Yeah, so I don't think I need to go further into that series because of the dissection and stuff. It just doesn't appeal to me very much. The next one I read was another one of the Bookshots, not this one, I'll go through this one in a minute, but another Bookshot by James Patterson, and it was set in, the theme was Valentine's Day. The characters were Jack and his wife Z. Jack was an entrepreneur, restaurateur, quite well versed in business. He was quite successful. He was planning a Valentine's Day weekend for his wife Z, who was 4 to 5 months pregnant with their first child. It's his 2nd marriage. He lived in this really big house that he converted into apartments, and each apartment held one of his family members, so they all lived together in this big apartment block, and it seemed to be that they were all happy and content, except that Jack had an enemy, and the murderer, the enemy, just really wanted to get to Jack, and the best way that could be done would be, of course, to eliminate his nearest and dearest. So in the first chapter or so, there was a murder of his employee. Didn't go into too much detail at that stage, but then the second murder was quite graphic, and to be honest, I felt sickened, and I just shut the book and threw it away. It was that bad for me. So if you ever come across James Patterson Bookshots and it's about Valentine's Day, don't read it, guys. It's disgusting. The murderer, the writer, I think it was a woman. I'm not sure. I can't remember now, and I don't really care because I'm never going to read it again. Went into gory, graphic detail of the murder. Every single detail of how they sliced and diced this murder victim, and it was awful. And I don't know why it was so graphic. It didn't need to be so graphic. It could have just been, I don't know. James Patterson is graphic sometimes. The books, about 95% of the time, graphic and violent. but this time was just over the top. And the murder victim was actually Z, Jack's wife, and as I mentioned, she was 4 to 5 months pregnant. So not only did the murderer kill Z, they killed the baby as well, and that just to me is just a no-no. One, the first no-no, and the second one was being so graphic. So I would not recommend that book at all. So if you come across it, don't read it. And I just threw it away. So the next book that another book shots that came, I bought with that other one because they're hard to find. So when you find them, I sort of try and get them if I'm interested in it. And this one was quite good. It's the Woman's Murder Club, and it sits in between number 3 and number 4, I think, right in the middle there. Because I have the series, I'm trying to collect the series of the Women's Murder Club. I've got 1 through to 5 at the moment complete, so I'm looking forward to that, and I've still got the others to fill in. But I'm not going to be reading them all in order. I'm just going to read them whenever I feel like it, but I'm reading them in order. Does that make sense? So this one sits in between 3 and 4, I think, by what the story is as it's revealed. I like Detective Lindsay Boxer. She's quite a good character. She's interesting. She's a police officer, and she goes about trying to solve crime and things like that. And this one had a really good ending. It was a very interesting ending. I enjoyed the ending. It was satisfying. Overall, it was a good book and good for my collection. And this was printed in 2016. So I would recommend that if you are interested in reading the Women's Murder Club book series by James Patterson. It wasn't too violent. It had a little bit of violence in it. As I said, James Patterson is always known to be violent 95% of the time. Some of his books aren't. This one wasn't too bad, but it was quite good. I enjoyed that one. So that was the third one that I read, fourth one that I read for the month. Now the next 2 have come to me from my friend's partner who passed away only a few weeks ago now, about 6 weeks ago, something like that. So this is from Karen's collection. She loved to read Anne Cleeves, so I have been given her a collection of the Vera series, which is, I have read a few books of hers, of Anne Cleeves, so I enjoyed them, the Vera series, so I took these ones, so I inherited these books, and I'm quite happy to have them in my collection as well. So I've read these 2 at the moment, and I have a few more to read. I didn't start them in order, but I have now since put them into order. So the first book I read was Anne Cleeves' Silent Voices. It's a Vera series. If you know, there is a Vera series on the BBC about a detective, I think in Scotland, I'm around about that area, and she's a very interesting character. I think sometimes Anne Cleeves writes her a little bit derogatorily, I don't know, and she puts it down a little bit, and I think that's not very fair. So I sort of think, oh, that's not fair. But Vera, you either like her or you don't like her. Most people don't. She has an off-sided Joe who helps her, another detective, and he's, I think, probably gets a bit annoyed with her, but he's quite willing to go along with her and do whatever she needs because he's also in the detective business. So this was interesting. I liked it. I thought it was quite easy to read. It was quite a quick read. I read it in a day and a bit, I think. So Vera, Detective Inspector Vera Stanhope finds a body of a woman in the sauna room of her local gym. At first she thinks it is the death of natural causes, but then Vera spots ligature marks around the victim's throat and has another murder case on her hands. This is taken by interviews with all the locals in the area. And of course, all the locals in that little village have secrets, and Vera has to untangle all those to find out who the murderer is. The murderer actually surprised me in a sort of way. I sort of was leaning towards that sort of conclusion, but I was surprised by actually who did it. So I had a couple of people in mind, and the one that did it, what did surprise me, and it was a satisfying ending. So I would recommend that for any Anne Cleeves fans, especially of the Vera series. She also has another one, Shetland, but I don't get into that one. I haven't been able to get into that series, but I have been able to get into the Vera series, so that was quite good. And that was printed in 2011. So that was quite good. So that was a good read. The second one that I read, this is the second in the series, another Vera Stanhope novel. So they thought she was a murderer, but now she's a victim. So 10 years ago, 15-year-old Abigail Mantle was murdered, her cold body discovered lying in a ditch. Her father's girlfriend was found guilty of the crime. Now evidence has emerged that proves her innocence and means that Abigail's killer still roams free. So it was a really good book, telling tales. The first part was about the villagers and Emma's, who is Abigail's best friend, and she starts questioning her, how well she knew her best friend Abigail, and Emma and the rest of the village tell their side of what they remember, and that sort of thing comes through for the first part. The second part is Vera's input, and the third part is back to the villagers and solving the crime. Now Emma lives a little bit in, she's not satisfied with her life with her husband and her baby. She loves her baby, she loves her husband, but there's just something that's just, she's not quite satisfied. So she sort of fantasizes and thinks about another person and where her life would be if she did things differently and things like that. So I felt a bit sorry for her in the end, because she's normal and she doesn't do anything to harm anybody else, or anyone would think she's just okay, but she has these fantasies. We all have fantasies, don't we? But hers just sort of, I felt sorry for her because she wasn't satisfied with what she had. So, but overall the murderer is found, and I was surprised by who the murderer turns out to be, and what happens also with another murder as well that happens in this series. So there's another murder as well in this one, and that surprised me as well. So it was a good book. I enjoyed it. Again, I think I might have, I don't know, I'm tossing up which one I liked the most between the two that I read in November. So I haven't got a favourite. They were both as good as each other, I think. But each story is different, but it's set in a little village somewhere. I think it's in Scotland. Yeah, so that was good. I really enjoyed that one. And that was printed in 2005. So that was a good book too. You might enjoy that if you like Anne Cleeves and Vera. She's a very interesting character, Vera. I like her. But I haven't actually watched the series on TV. Okay, the next book. I don't know what to tell you about this book without being mean to Emma Kavanagh. The story itself was fantastic. I really enjoyed the theme, the premise of the story, To Catch a Killer by Emma Kavanagh. But I think I would have enjoyed it more had it been written by somebody else. I'll tell you a bit about it. I've been watching you, D.S. Alice Parr. I saw you trying to save the poor young woman you found in the park, the woman I tried to kill. I've been waiting for you to find her family, to find someone who cares about her, but you can't, can you? You've never had a case like this. I know everything about you. You know nothing about me, even though I'm the man you're looking for, and you will never catch me. I guessed who the killer was straight from the get-go virtually, by the way the author wrote certain parts of the story. So within a certain amount of time, you sort of think about who could it be, but I sort of guessed straight away by the way that it was written. Some of the parts were written, and I thought, yeah, that's the murderer for sure. But the story basically is that this killer, he's a man, as it mentions here, keeps Alice on her toes, and is always one step ahead of her, so she never quite catches up with them. And that's what the whole premise of the book is, trying to catch the killer, trying to find out who the killer murdered, because they don't know who she is or where she comes from. Any information about her is is within the first part of the book. The second part, Alice actually goes to the US on a lead and meets up with another detective called Gabriel, and they try to find out who the killer is. They find out who the killer is, but they still can't catch him. And I said it was a good book. The premise of the book, the theme of the book was really quite good. The story itself, but it ended up left it on a cliffhanger. 5 years this book has been in print. 5 years, guys, and the second part of the book has only just been published, I think last year or something else like that. So we've had to wait 4.5 years to get the second book in the series. There's another book to come which hasn't been published yet, and 5 years on a cliffhanger. I only just read it this November, and I'm already annoyed with it. So just imagine reading it 5 years ago and still not having any solution to the cliffhanger. It's frustrating, and I'm really annoyed. Because I looked it up on Goodreads. There is the second edition available in the library. This is a library book. But I don't know if I can be bothered actually reading it, because I looked up on Goodreads. They're mostly fairly accurate. Sometimes, other people's opinions are a little bit different to your own. But I understand that the second edition takes the next step and talks about the killer's sister and how she relates to the story, how she relates to the murderer. So there's not really a satisfying ending to the cliffhanger in this book. I don't know for sure. I can get the book at the library, and I might, just to satisfy my own need to find out what the cliffhanger if it's resolved or not, or I have to wait for the third book, which isn't been published yet. So I'm not keeping this book because it's a library book anyway, but I don't know if I would bother trying to find this book unless I found it cheap in an op shop or something else like that. But otherwise, it's okay. The book itself, the story itself is okay, but I think it should be written by somebody else and not left with a cliffhanger, because I hate cliffhangers, especially when you're going to wait. It's 2019. 5 years for a solution. I know who the killer is. Everyone knows who the killer is. It's the wolf. That's the name, the moniker that the killer takes on, the wolf. So, I don't know, guys. We'll see what happens with that one. The next book I borrowed from a friend of mine, my 92-year-old lady that I visit sometimes. We just swap books from time to time, and I swapped this book with her for another, and it's a James Patterson book. It's by Nancy Allen, though. James Patterson does commission other writers to write his ideas into a book form. As my son says, he's got thousands of ideas rushing around in his head. He can't write all the stories, so he does commission other authors to write those books for him, those ideas for him, and they both make profit. I don't know what happens there. I don't know how exactly it works. But this is 2 books in one. It's the Jailhouse Lawyer, 2 gripping legal thrillers, 1 purpose, justice. The first story, Jailhouse Lawyer. This Jailhouse Lawyer and Power of Attorney. Jailhouse Lawyer is about Mandy, a lawyer who has a son who has a medical problem. He's just had heart surgery. He might need more. But the lawyer that she works for, the associate that she works for, is no longer going to pay for her son's medical expenses through their insurance program. She gets really peed off and leaves that practice and finds a job online in this little country town in the US. So with everything that she needs somehow or another, it's just perfect for her. Too perfect, too good to be true. It is, and she understands that and she accepts that, but takes the job anyway. And the corrupt judge is really a nasty little piece of business and just owns the town virtually. And she goes to work as a district attorney, defender or something else like that. I'm not exactly sure. Her name is Mandy. A good lawyer by all standards. She knows her business and stuff like that. But you know how women are supposed to be strong and but not step on people's toes. You know, you got to be strong, but you got to earn respect by being strong, but still within the rules. I know the rules were very different in this time because the judge was corrupt, so she didn't really have to follow the rules because she was trying to, rectify the situation and work all that out. But she was such a nasty piece of business. I just did not like Mandy. Martha. Her name was Martha, not Mandy. Her name was Martha, and I just could not gel with her because she was angry from the get-go, and I couldn't gel with her. What happened to her was nasty. It was violent. It was in the pit of your stomach. You thought, oh, this is gruesome. I don't want this to happen. And the judge was a nasty piece of business, granted. But I didn't like Mandy. Did I say it again? Martha. Why am I calling her Mandy? I don't know why I'm calling her Mandy. Because it was Martha. Maybe she should have been a Mandy. Martha. But yeah, and the second book, Power of Attorney, again another lawyer called Lee. She again was in a job that she was disillusioned with because she was on the side of the insurance companies, and the companies were ending up fleecing the client because they needed the money, but she made it so that the person injured got less money and the insurance company came out on top. So she was very disillusioned in that because she saw that the people that needed the assistance weren't actually getting it, and she was actually the reason they weren't getting it. So she felt a bit disillusioned, a bit guilty, and so she quit her job. At the same time, her mother asked her to come back to help with her father's lawyer firm because her father has Alzheimer's and he needed help to sort through his papers and perhaps take on some of his last clients to do that. So and then while she's there in the little country town in America, Amber is accused of murdering her cousins, which were her foster parents at that time, and so Lee takes on Amber's case in court, prove her innocence, or just to get a lighter sentence, or whatever else that came through that. It is very much of a trigger for a lot of people, because it mentions sexual abuse, and it mentions human trafficking, so you might get triggered with that one because it's quite graphic, and some parts of it I thought, oh, that's awful. How dare you behave like that? The men, of course, not Amber. So you feel justified. If Amber did it, you feel justified for why she did it. But it's Lee's job, of course, to either prove her innocence or to get a lesser jail sentence for the crime. So it was interesting. I liked the stories themselves. I didn't like what's going to call her, Mandy, Martha. I liked Lee, but yeah, that was an interesting book. But it's borrowed, so I can return it, but I wouldn't look for it unless I found it cheap in the op shop. So it was an okay read, but not one that I would want to keep. Okay, this last book. This was not meant to be in the list because I started it on the 30th of November and I couldn't put it down. So I finished it on the 30th of November and I read the last word and shut the book on at exactly 11:59. So it slipped into the November list, and I'm glad it did because it was a really, really good book. Again, it's by James Patterson, but it was written by Emily Raymond. Again, he commissioned Emily Raymond to write this book. It's a very, very good book. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. It's as I said, I started it and could not finish it. I couldn't put it down to finish it. I had to finish it. I couldn't put it down. So it was in my... I finished it in bed because I just could not put it down. It's a trigger book, and the warning should be right in the front, not at the back where it is. It's the author's note. It's an author's note, but it should have been in the front, right in the front, not in the back, because it's a trigger, definitely a trigger. I loved the character of Hannah. She was written so well that I actually felt she was real, and you really felt you wanted to protect her, to help her, and the other main character, Jordan, you really got to know him, and you wanted him to win out in the end as well. So it was written very well. But it is a trigger, guys, because it talks about teenage mental health, talks about teenage suicide, schizophrenia, and that sort of thing. So whatever other mental health issues come up, it's quite daunting, it's quite jarring, it's quite raw. And you laugh and you cry through this whole book. And you're really wanting Hannah to solve her predicament, and you want Jordan to be able to solve that for her. So the girl in the castle, she could save everyone if only someone believed her. And as with most what do you call them? Let's have a look, find out. My name is Hannah Dory, and I need you to believe me. Hannah is brought to Bellman Psych, told she is suffering from hallucination and delusions, but only she knows the truth. Hannah must return to the past and save her sister. Psych student Jordan is the only person who seems to care, but he isn't sure what to believe. And Hannah has even bigger problems. If she doesn't make it back, her sister will die. But if she keeps going back, she might never escape. So, yeah, you don't know what is real and what's fantasy when it comes to this book. And you start thinking, well, maybe Hannah is telling the truth. And you start to wonder whether your own sanity is intact, because it's really quite an interesting book. I really enjoyed it, even though it triggered a few times for me, but not enough to stop reading. But it could trigger some people a great deal, so just be aware of that if you ever choose to read it. But it's a really good book, and I really wanted to get involved in Hannah's story and allow Jordan to solve the past for her, to see what really happened to her. What really happened to her in the past was surprising, very raw, and it made me feel very sad. But it was very satisfying too, to find out the truth. So, and to find out whether or not, you know, what happened to her is part of her fantasy or is real. So it was really quite interesting, the ending, and I was quite satisfied with how it turned out. So it's a good read if you are not triggered, but yeah, I'm keeping this one for sure. It's a book that makes me question already, and I will read it again to clarify those questions for myself, but I'm just going to be sitting on it for the moment to see how it goes. But yeah, I recommend this one for anyone who wants a good read, but I say beware of triggers, guys. So that's what's coming through with that one. So that was what I read in November. This one's frustrating. A good story, but so frustrating. So I'm quite happy with all of those, what I've read. Definitely keeping my Anne Cleves. Oh, this was written in 2022, guys, last year. And this was written in 2016, Jack the Ripper. Yeah, so that's what I read. And I had a good time reading those. But I don't know if I'm going to be reading this one. I don't think I will. I don't think I need to. Yeah. Or the other two after that. So that's it. I've got some more that I borrowed from the library yesterday. So I'm going to be reading some of those. So hopefully, if I read them, I'll let you know for my next December wrap-up. But this is November's wrap-up, and this is what I read. So, yeah. So, see you later, guys, and so many blessings.